I think a good coach knows the circumstances of everything that's circling around his program. And with the missteps that Tennessee has had over the last decade and a half or whatever, changing coaches, the last thing a coach needs to be going after is the fan base. He ought to be kissing every hand of the 45,000 that were in there that would follow this program after what they've gone through the coaching profession. Now, if he feels like they let him down because Georgia's bragging about they had 80-something thousand in their state, well, that's Georgia. Don't worry about Georgia. You need to deal with the team that you're coaching north of the border of Georgia in Tennessee.
Well, we see them every year, Coin. Do you think the Tennessee fan base can handle the patience that is needed for what will probably take multiple years to rebuild?
Well, I don't think that they've showed that patience very well. If they have any patience, look how many coaches they've gone through. You know, I mean, Lane Kiffin perhaps could have stayed there for a while, but he bolted on his own. The rest have been run out of town for one reason or another.
Some justifiably.
I'm not saying they're not justified. It shows you the poor hiring habits of the administration at Tennessee. Now, this guy, you know, he brings a lot of great credentials. There's no reason not to think that he can build a winner at Tennessee once they establish their recruiting turf and stop Clemson from coming in and pulling out all the best players out of Tennessee, as the Tigers have been doing here of late. But you have to be patient. This year's team, looking at them on paper and from what I've read about them, I mean, they don't impress you right now. I would say you look at the SEC East, Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, maybe even Missouri would be better than Tennessee. I don't know. I'm guessing at Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Well, the biggest buffer he has, and I'd make real good friends with him right now, is you got Philip Fulmer sitting there with a 4-year deal as your athletic director. He will act as your buffer between the fan base if you use him properly.
Marcus Lattimore has been scoring for South Carolina in recruiting, and we'll explain how next with Coin's Recruiting Report.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Coming up, we'll go more inside the numbers of the big weekends for both South Carolina and Clemson baseball. Hear from both head coaches in hour two and outline the week ahead for both. Again, an ambitious week for Clemson, also for South Carolina. We'll get back into the Roth Felder news. We have some comments on our Twitter here that we will get to as well about the Roth Felder departure from South Carolina basketball. And as Corn so dutifully pointed out, that is the fifth departure, not related to graduation. I was neglecting Corey Holden of South Carolina, who departed earlier this season. And really, it's put South Carolina, I don't want to say in a dire situation roster-wise, but Frank Martin needs to get some pieces. He's got three openings of the people that at least are confirmed to be back this year, with the exception of Chris Silva and Brian Bowen, who are testing the NBA draft waters. But three open spots, even without those two, and could be more if those two end up departing. We wanted to clear up something from over the weekend that not only got spoken on our Twitter, but on this program in regards to the Board of Trustees motion that got passed on Friday with regards to Dawn Staley. Corn, you spoke to Ray Tanner over the weekend and got some clarification on some things.
Yeah, well, it was reported by us and by the newspapers about some clauses in her contract. In particular, it was reported that she was going to receive, if she stayed until 2022, a payoff of $1.5 million. And so last night, I guess it was last night, accidentally, Ray Tanner tweeted the word no to us that showed up on our timeline. And you say, well, how did he do it accidentally? I mean, I checked with him and he did say it was an accident. He was attempting to direct message somebody and accidentally hit tweet, and it showed up on our timeline. So I guess he must have had his Twitter open to our page. Mm-hmm. It's not like Ray Tanner to tweet at somebody if he has something to discuss with them.
He would do it privately.
Absolutely. So, but that caused a great deal of reaction from people on our Twitter timeline. So to follow up with him today to find out what the deal is, he explained to me after we went over the fact that he aroused all the negative nannies on our Twitter timeline to flare up at us, and I told him I appreciated that. But what he wanted to clarify, and this was also wrong, in the newspapers as well, and he said that when they had the trustee meeting on Friday, he wanted to explain it in detail to reporters, but when he came out of the meeting, everybody was gone, except for you, because you came in later and you called him after the second meeting, but you didn't really talk to him about this. We just saw it, of course, being reported elsewhere. But the bottom line was this: he doesn't get a check for $1.5 million in 2022. He says it's an insurance policy. It's called a split dollar program. And at some point down the line, the university will get its money back with interest. She has a beneficiary on the death side and has the opportunity to take a tax-free dividend at some point during her retirement years. So this is something apparently it's relatively new. It's complex. That is the Reader's Digest explanation. It's much more detailed and complicated than that. But
it's not a longevity bonus like we originally.
That is correct. That is correct. So he cleared that up. We cleared it up on Twitter. Now we clear it up here.
FoundersFCU.org is how you can assist you in all of your financial needs. Visit Founders Federal Credit Union online at FoundersFCU.com. Proud sponsor of Sports Talk and South Carolina Radio Network. A busy recruiting weekend, Corn, including a commitment from the Gamecocks, helped out largely by one of their newest staff members.
Yeah, the Gamecocks picked up a commitment from 2020 offensive lineman Tyshawn Wanamaker, 6'4", 330, out of Calhoun County. And he committed to the Gamecocks at their Spurs Up cookout, which was held over the weekend. And he said one of the primary reasons that he committed to South Carolina Saturday was a talk that Marcus Lattimore gave at this cookout to the recruits who were there. And he was very impressed by that, and that moved him to go ahead and commit on the spot. And he said those words that Lattimore spoke about touched him. And so he chose to be there. To this point, not a heavily offered prospect. Georgia State was the only other offer he could think of. So getting the chance to play major college football in the SEC, he said, was just a chance of a lifetime. Too great to pass up. Though he did say he wants to go on through the recruiting process later on in his career and take some other official visits. But I feel like this one will be pretty firm for South Carolina as the process moves on. He gives the Gamecocks 2 commitments in the 2020 class, the other being running back Mikos Todd of Villarica, Georgia. Now, running back linebacker Quavaris Crouch of Charlotte was interviewed by Rivals yesterday at the Combine at Nation Ford High School, and he said he will visit USC on Saturday. He mentioned USC, Tennessee, Florida State, and Michigan as 4 programs that are strong with him at this point. I know Clemson fans, from reading their recruiting websites, have read a lot of things related to Clemson from Crouch, and he has talked about Clemson before, but he did not mention Clemson in this interview. He was not asked about Clemson. Sometimes you have to ask him to get the answer. He wasn't asked about the Tigers. He did not volunteer the Tigers in this particular interview. 2020 offensive lineman Josh Braun of Live Oak, Florida, was at USC on Saturday, and he said line coach Eric Wolford's been recruiting him hard since last year. The Gamecocks will be a factor with him moving forward as he shortens his list. He has strong connections to Georgia Tech through his brothers, but he won't consider Tech. He said he's too big to play on the offensive line at Tech in a triple option offense. He's just not their type of offensive lineman. Clemson has also been interested in him, but he says he doesn't want to go to a school in a small town setting, so not going to consider Clemson either. USC target, Texas A&M grad transfer defensive back Nick Harvey visited Tennessee over the weekend. He's also been to USC, Auburn, and Arizona. He's considering Florida and Oklahoma State for his final visit, according to the UT 24/7 site. Offensive lineman Caden Wallace of Princeton, New Jersey, USC and Clemson target, committed to Penn State. Clemson's in the top 10 with defensive lineman Nathan Pickering of Seminary, Mississippi. USC target defensive back Jalen Phillips of Lawrenceville, Georgia, has said August 20th for his announcement. Basketball, USC commitment point guard TJ Moss of Memphis will sign his LOI tomorrow. 6'5" Jalen Richard of Durham, North Carolina, committed to the College of Charleston. And according to some internet recruiting sites, Clemson offered 2 more players over the weekend, 6'9" Issa Muhammad of Norcross, Georgia, and 6'5" Khalif Battle of Metuchen, New Jersey. There you go with recruiting. Don't forget to check it out on our website, SportsTalkSC.com. Always there for you, 24/7. And on Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting.
And the one thing I think, too, again, going back to the Felder thing, the fact that they will get TJ Moss to sign his LOI on Tuesday at least provides a little bit more stability for that position, or at least some stability for that position. But I'm wondering now, Corn, if it almost ramps up his desire to go get another point guard in this class, or at least somebody from the grad transfer market.
I would think he'd have to. You just can't have one point guard. Risk of injury is too great. You've seen what happened to South Carolina point guards over the last couple of years. The Johnson kid that transferred in, he had injury problems. Mm-hmm. Holden who transferred in. He had injury problems. Felder got kicked out, left them very shorthanded at the point guard spot, and it's a big reason why they struggled the way they did this year.
Yeah, and that really was it hurt you at two positions because Gravett had shown you sparks of brilliance at the off guard position when he played it the year before, and then suddenly you shove him into the point guard position, which he said he wasn't ready to do. I remember the last guy I remember this, and please, I know we're in the Bible Belt, but I think it's a good statement. I'll never forget when Doc Rivers was drafted, when they had, 7 or 8 rounds going in the NBA draft, and he was drafted 5th round by the Hawks. He played forward at Marquette, and then Hubie Brown grabbed him and said, "You're a point guard." And he said after he was learning to play point guard, he said, "Look, if Jesus Christ was a basketball player, he'd be a point guard."
That's crazy.
That Doc Rivers said. He said,
1 hour in the books. When we come back, we'll hear from both the head coach of South Carolina baseball and the head coach of Clemson baseball on big weekends for both on Sports Talk.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Back on Hour 2 of Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblut, Professor Tom Hayes, Brian Leonard producing. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Monday evening. 800-956-7266 is how you get in touch with us. We'll read some more of your tweets in this hour as well at SportsTalkSC on Twitter. Also, you can watch us on Periscope at SportsTalkSC, also accessible at SportsTalkSC.com. Clemson a sweep of Wake Forest, South Carolina a sweep this weekend of LSU. Rolf Felder no longer a part of the South Carolina men's basketball team. Just some of the stories we're kicking around. We'll get some more insight on all of those as we continue throughout this hour. We'll start with the Gamecocks. Corn was there for 2 of the 3 games. I was there for game number 1. You saw the bulk of the weekend, and you saw what I think we all can kind of agree could be a turning point for this Gamecock ball club.
Well, it should be. You win a sweep of an SEC series against a nationally ranked team that LSU was at the time, after struggling as South Carolina had been doing for most of the year, just 3 games over 500 going in. And now all of a sudden you sweep them. You're 500 in the league. You've got some momentum going up to Fluor Field tomorrow night to play Furman before you go to Vanderbilt to play a very tough Vanderbilt squad. But there's with any baseball season, unless you're just a dominant team that's going to win 50 some odd games, as we saw here many years ago, I mean, you're going to have those ups and downs, but you look for that point. You look for that tipping point one way or the other. And I mean, I know it's just one weekend, but I think the South Carolina team now is as whole as it's going to get, as healthy as it can be. And with Madison Stokes now playing first base, and he does a good job over there, Rowe handling second, you have you're solid at short and third. Your outfield is now complete with Hopkins back in center. If they can get Olsen going a little bit more with the bat, because Cortez has picked it up, that could be a pretty dangerous lineup there. And plus, they're alternating the catchers right now, and neither one is hitting great, but they're not killing the team back there, and they're doing a good job defensively. So Tolbert really impresses me at short. He made 2 really nice plays on the bag yesterday, getting a couple of caught stealings down there. And, of course, Rowe had the sensational play, the jump throw to second base on a really difficult play. Yeah, that was impressive. So they're doing the little things well, and that's what takes you from an also-ran into a successful team.
Someone on Periscope says, I think if we get something over the next couple of weeks, we can continue to maybe turn this down the snowball. And you, Pro, love to talk about the psychological part of the game. How much different does 23-17 and 9-9 in the league feel? How much differently does that feel than 20-17 and 6-9 in the league?
Hey, you got to look in the mirror and say, look, let's put the foot to the gas pedal and let's see where we can carry this thing and maybe make a bid. Not only trying to avoid that one game playing with the SEC tournament, but find yourself sneaking into the NCAA tournament. I'm still trying to figure it out, though. Should we be playing the Hank Williams song Attitude Adjustment, or is the mere fact that their bats are now getting healthy?
The magnitude of this weekend's series win not lost on South Carolina's head coach, Mark Kingston.
One of the better weekends we've had in a while around here for our program. Had so many great alumni in town this weekend, which is great to see, and continue to meet all of them and see a lot of them for the second, third, and fourth time. Obviously, we played great baseball all week. We had great crowds, and it was South Carolina versus LSU. So as Coach Tanner said to me in the tunnel afterwards, that's why you're here, to experience stuff like that. And so I agreed 100% with him.
With the sweep and obviously how you won today, do you feel like this could be a turning point for this team?
Well, it's always about the next game. This was a great weekend. We got a reality check on Tuesday, and we responded the way you want a team and a program to respond. But now it's on to the next game. We need to do a good job on Tuesday because that's been a cause for concern this year. And then it's on to the next weekend. So we're going to enjoy this weekend because I think it was very important for us to have this kind of success against such a great program like LSU. But now once that settles in, it's on to the next game.
Mark, what was the mood in the dugout when you guys fell behind 6-0, and what does this say about your team to come back like that?
Well, I'm hoping that is a great learning experience for our team. Once again, we fell behind 6-0, much like we did at Clemson on Sunday, a very similar situation. And we started scratching and clawing. And Bush was really, really good today. that guy's got a bright future that started for them today. And once we got into the bullpen, we were just able to scratch out some base runners, some runs, got some big hits, and it turned into a rally. And so once again, the difference between the Clemson game and today, obviously, is we were able to not only tie it, but then take the lead and hand the ball over to Sawyer and get the last out. So pitching, we picked up Cody today. He wasn't at his best, but Eddie was outstanding, and then Sawyer was exactly what we all know he is there at the end.
To play as well as y'all did over the course of the weekend, to get the sweep, was it more of a mental hurdle or physical hurdle, do you think, for these guys to be able to come through, coming back from behind today and win all 3 games?
Well, I think it was both, actually. We made physical adjustments in our swings with those 2 hard practices we've talked about now for the last few days. We made physical adjustments to our hitters and what we were doing in preparation. But then mentally, to fall behind 6-0 against a storied program like LSU and come back and win, I think that's going to be very beneficial for our mentality. No doubt about it. When you do that, when you have that kind of experience, when you get in that situation again, you can draw upon that. So I think it was physical and mental this weekend.
You mentioned Eddie already, but what's it say about a guy who maybe hadn't pitched in a while to come out and give you that kind of strong outing over 4 innings?
Well, he looked fresh. He looked really fresh, and that's why it was great that we didn't have to use him in the first 2 games. And that's why you have to try to make strategic decisions over the course of a series. Do you bring in a guy like that early on in the series, or do you try to get through the first couple games so that he's fresh for today, where you can extend him out like we did? The fact that we were able to score a lot of runs on Friday and Saturday allowed us to keep him in the bullpen, not have to use him, and then he was fresh today. If we had to use him on Friday or Saturday, I don't know that we would have gotten the same outing. So that's why every game, every run you score is important throughout the course of the series.
That's Mark Kingston. What South Carolina has left: road series at Vanderbilt and A&M, sandwiched between those. Home series against Ole Miss and Missouri. Also midweek action against Furman, College of Charleston, and USC Upstate. 2 of those at Founders Park. And the College of Charleston game, the grudge match with Chad Holbrook's Cougars at Spirit Communications Park. How do your expectations for those Final 4 series, keeping in mind 3 of those 4 teams have better records in South Carolina, how have your expectations changed based off of what we saw this past weekend?
Well, I mean, I think you got to feel more positive about South Carolina after what we saw this past weekend. There's no way that you can't. This was a team that picked itself up by the boots and played some really good baseball. Now, if they can go to Vanderbilt and scratch out a win or 2, certainly you don't expect a sweep or anything like that. Maybe a series victory. And with Logan Chapman pitching as well as he is right now, if he continues to give you the really good start on Friday and you can pick up a win there, then you feel really good about your situation with Hill on Saturday. Now, Ole Miss is going gangbusters. They're a really good baseball team. But I think if you're South Carolina, you hope to go to Vandy, get at least a win, and then come home and win the series against Ole Miss 2 out of 3. Then hope that you can sweep Missouri at home, and then go out to Texas A&M and get at least 1, maybe 2 wins out there. That'll give you a above 500 record in the SEC, and that'll put you into the NCAA tournament.
I'll go with the old cliche. If they can get to 500 on the road, I don't care if they win the series at A&M or Vandy.
One of those 2.
And finish at 500, and then come home and maybe steal the series from a tremendously talented Ole Miss team, and then sweep Missouri. I think they're looking up to do something. And maybe this team will do like last year's team and actually make some noise for a change again in the SEC tournament.
5-1 at home and 3-3 on the road would put them at 8-4 to finish out the season. That would finish them at 17-13 in the SEC East, which wouldn't be bad, Corn.
No, it would not. And then you would kick yourself because all those midweek losses are going to come back to bite you when it comes down to hosting time. Because it's probably not going to be good enough to get you in a position to host.
Well, they could be fortunate if they get to that 17-13 to be back in the tournament, because that'd be a tremendous step forward, and that's something we weren't certainly talking about a week ago here. To Clemson baseball and their turnaround to Winston-Salem over the weekend. Next on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Willie P., the Corn, and the Pro all with you. 800-956-7266. I'll read some of the tweets as we get you throughout the evening. We have most of our tweets coming on our stuff about Roth Felder and his no longer inclusion with the South Carolina men's basketball team. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in about 10 minutes' time. Again, you can continue to weigh in 800-956-7266 at Sports Talk SC on Twitter and also at Sports Talk SC on Periscope. Visit foundersfcu.org. So Founders Federal Credit Union can assist you with all of your financial needs. Founders Federal Credit Union, a proud sponsor of Sports Talk on South Carolina Radio Network. Just like the Gamecocks did this weekend, Corn, the Clemson Tigers played their way into a sweep over Wake Forest, and it was especially pertinent for them because, according to Baseball America, they had fallen out of the hosting bids for the NCAA tournament, so they needed to at least hold some serve. And I don't want to say they needed a sweep, but they certainly needed to at least show that they were the kind of team that had built themselves all the way up to a ranking that at one point was number 3 in the nation among some polls.
Yeah, good win for them over the weekend. They had to really battle in all 3 games to pull off this sweep. And I guess the easiest win was the last one yesterday by a 9-4 count. But that 7-5 game that they played on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, I think Wake had the lead there for a while. Yeah, Wake had a 5-2 lead, and Clemson had to come back and get some good relief pitching from Strider and Miller. I tell you who's going gangbusters for Clemson right now is Riley Gillum. His ERA is 0.90. Opposing teams are hitting like $115 against him, and he has just been lights out for them. And so in the back end of their bullpen, it gives them a great opportunity to close out wins if they're in that situation. Now, Jacob Hennessy did not pitch particularly well in Friday's game, but the Tigers managed to come back to win, and that's a bonus for them. And then on Saturday, another tight one, and they won that one 4-3. Again, this is when Gillum came in and got the last inning for them. Crawford started, did a very good job over 7 innings. Then they won the game yesterday. So that's the kind of a sweep that Clemson should get if they're going to be a host team and be a top 15, top 20 team. Wake is okay. They're 10-11 in league play now, but under 500 overall. So that's a very good road win, but one that Clemson should have gotten in terms of at least a series win, and a sweep makes it all the more better for them.
You know, I'm kind of, I don't want to say perplexed, but I think about Kyle Wilkie having the weekend that he did. He was 7 for 18, a homer and 5 RBIs, and you look up at the stats and he's second on the team in hitting. I mean, is that almost something that kind of snuck up on us and kind of took us by surprise? Because I think that you and I both thought that, while Seth Beer probably was going to be your leading hitter for a lot of it, or even Logan Davidson, maybe even Drew Wharton, but Wilkie has provided some much needed offense, and I don't want to say quietly so, but he's had an impact.
Well, he wasn't supposed to be the starting catcher. Remember, it's supposed to be Chris Williams going into the season, and Beer was going to play first base again. They went with that experiment in the preseason and realized it wasn't going to work out all that well for him. So, and then Wilkie, if I remember correctly, was hurt a little bit, and Robert Jolly was the starting catcher there for a while early, and then Wilkie took over, and he's done a heck of a job. And now, Beers playing the outfield. Williams is playing at first base. The thing about this Clemson team is, as a group, still not hitting where you would expect them to hit. Remember what Monty Lee said in the preseason. This was going to be one of the best hitting teams, he thought, especially in the middle of their lineup. But you look at the middle of the lineup, and now Beers got his average up to 291. He's really climbed in the last week to 10 days. And, of course, he's a guy who's going to be on base a lot, and his slugging percentage is going to be very high. But Williams is only batting 252. And so, that's not what they were expecting from him. He does have 11 home runs and leads the team with 43 RBIs, but the average hasn't been there. Cromwell's batting 248. So, top to bottom, it has not been a good hitting Clemson team, yet it is a team that can hit with power and can score runs.
At 248 average during the week, Pro, and I think so much of what Clemson does well is, again, taking the free 90 and being patient. They did draw 15 free passes over the course of the 4 games they played between the Georgia game Tuesday and then the 3 games they played in the Triad. I wonder how sustainable that model is, because even so, they had a 342 on base percentage. You want to see that closer to 400.
It's very difficult to figure out a hitter when he's going well, because I've always had the feeling there's a thin line between taking your walks and being aggressive at the plate, because a lot of hits you get, you may be swinging at balls. You can be too patient. I mean, if one is up in your eyes, but you see it and you've timed it, put the wood on it. I mean, the one thing I will say about Beer, I think he's hitting better now because he's come to the conclusion that his concentration has to be such that I'm going to see 1 or at best 2 pitches per at bat. And when my pitch comes, I better be able to hit it.
Courtesy of the fine folks at Clemson Insider, here's how Monty Lee evaluated the weekend in Winston-Salem.
Played another great baseball game today. Pitched extremely well. Higginbotham just threw up zeros after zeros. And, the bullpen, Riley, did an outstanding job. We needed to stretch him out there. We were running low on arms and available arms, and we needed Riley to be stretched out there and give us something. And he certainly did. Our defense was really good today. Seth made a nice play there at the end of the ball game. And offensively, I mean, I don't know if I could have asked for a better day. We had 2 big innings. We hit the baseball hard. Williams with a homer, Bird, Wilkie, and Wharton. The 2 home runs late were big for us by Wilkie and Wharton. But, just put together good at-bats again. And, did a nice job on the mound and, found a way to get a sweep here at Wake Forest, which we needed. So we needed to get back, to our winning ways, and we certainly played that way this weekend. So very, very proud of the way we played today and the way we played this weekend.
You guys in that 4-run inning kind of scored in some unconventional ways there.
Yeah.
Saw that in baseball much?
Well, I'll tell you, I got to give Patrick Cromwell a lot of credit. He ran – what we would call the hot play, which is when you got a runner at second base and there's a pass ball, which is ball 4, then the batter runner runs and keeps going, because the runner at second base is going to advance to third. And if he keeps running, the catcher has to make a long throw to the middle of the field, and the middle infielder has to make a long throw back to the plate. So it's almost an automatic run if there's a pass ball 4 or strikeout with a runner at second base. And that's on Cromwell. Cromwell was just being very heads up. And you got to give Jordan Green credit on the safety squeeze. It was perfectly executed. We scored another run there. So, we made some mistakes, though, today. We had a couple base running snafus that we got to work on. But overall, I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better start out of Higginbotham today. And Riley was unbelievable for us out of the pen. And offensively, we were really good. I mean, we drove the baseball, got in good counts to hit all day, and swung the bats very well.
Moved Wilkie up in the order yesterday.
Yeah.
Then today came through with 3 more RBI.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the job he did this weekend.
Well, Wilkie's just one of those guys that, even when he's not hitting, he puts together good at bats. He'll give you competitive at bats, and we feel like, here lately he's been swinging the bat very well, and he, a lot of people don't realize that he leads us in hitting in ACC play. In ACC games, Wilkie is our best hitter. So he's been swinging the bat well, and he leads the team in batting average of runners in scoring position. So, we've been hitting him down in the order in that 8-hole, and just made a decision to bump him up to the 6th spot. The 6th spot's been a big RBI spot for us, and he's come up big for us.
To come to Wake and pick up the sweep, knowing you're heading into a 5-game week, how important was that just to finish off the sweep today?
Well, it was huge for us. I mean, we only worry about the, one game at a time, but now sitting here after the sweep, we got a heck of a tough week ahead of us. I mean, we have used so many of our bullpen arms and stretched some guys out. We got a heck of a challenge in the middle of the week this week trying to get through 18 innings. So I'm sure, with the bus ride home, it'll be a good one, but we'll have to start, turning the page and looking to, what are we going to do for 18 innings in the middle of the week.
That is what we heard from with Monty Lee. Again, a 5-game week, they said, with Kennesaw State, Presbyterian, as well as 3 games at Virginia. We'll continue to chronicle that for you over the next couple of days as we continue. We'll come back. Where does South Carolina go next to try and fill its latest roster vacancy in men's basketball on Sports Talk? Welcome back to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblue, Professor Tom Hayes as we continue. 800-956-7266, the phone number, at SportsTalkSC on Twitter, at SportsTalkSC on Periscope as well. In addition to Logan Chapman getting a SEC Co-Freshman of the Week honor, a couple of honors as well in state for Winthrop sophomore Zach Peak. He was the starting pitcher of the week. Also in the Big South with the 8 complete, he tossed against UNC Asheville. He had his 4th victory on Saturday. Wofford's Adam Scott named Southern Conference Pitcher of the Week. He struck out 9 batters and 7 scoreless as the Terriers won over the weekend. York Prep has announced the hiring of a new head basketball coach, Terry Davis, the former Carolina player. He coached, of course, at Louisville and Northwestern. Also led Louisville to a state championship back in 2013 as well. And also this came out just last night, a little bit also updated later on today. Former Charleston area quarterback, Somerville area quarterback Stephen Duncan, who's now at Western Kentucky, arrested Sunday on charges that included operating a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol. Unfortunate for him. Why are you laughing?
Nah, I'm laughing at Brian.
Oh, you are? Is he talking into his phone or talking into his watch? Look at
Apparently.
you. Look at that. It's funny.
Apparently, we have Get Smart calling us.
Well, Larry Davis was what, at Old Dominion? Was he sort of like an administrative assistant or player personnel?
I don't know.
Because I thought he'd gone to college.
He had done a couple of stints in the collegiate ranks, according to some of the information we got over the weekend. He was at Newberry and James Madison. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. Chris is calling from Charleston. He wants to talk on Sports Talk, listening to us in the Low Country. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
What's up?
Hey, I was just wondering what everybody's thinking about Kevin Woodall Jr. out of Coastal Carolina.
Who was that? I'm sorry?
Kevin Woodall Jr.
Corn, I'll defer to you on that. I'll cede my time to you over there on that.
He's having a big year. Georgetown kids swinging the bat big, a lot of home runs. They're winning series. They're still nationally ranked. I think he's got a great chance to earn All-American honors once again this year. So, yeah, I don't know if I have his numbers right in front of me, but I know he's having another big year, and Coastal is in position to win the Sun Belt once again. I think, if I remember correctly, they've won like 10 straight Sun Belt series.
Correct.
And so they're playing themselves into position. If they can, they play North Carolina tomorrow in Chapel Hill. That would be a beautiful win for them from the resume standpoint in trying to get a host spot in a regional.
And they play twice against them over the course of the next month. They play them once up there and once in Conway at Springsbrook Stadium. And, what they have left, they've got Monroe, they've got at Louisiana, and they've got Little Rock at Appalachian State still left on the schedule. They have played themselves into hosting talk and hosting chatter, and he's a big part of that. And I think from the standpoint of where Coastal sits, if they can get a hosting gig and they can steal what is probably going to be, in all likelihood, one in-state hosting bid, and they force Clemson to have to go across the state and play in there, that would certainly tilt the balance of power in the state when it comes to college baseball, Corn.
Well, I wouldn't count Clemson out just yet.
No.
I think they still have a terrific chance to win a bunch of games down the stretch, do well in the ACC tournament, and get a host spot, because they'll make a good bid in there for that as well. They'll pay what they think they need to pay to make sure they get a home gig again. Of course, it hasn't worked out for. Maybe the best thing for Clemson would be to go on the road, because they have failed to get out of 2 home regionals the last 2 years.
And of course, if South Carolina can keep their winning ways going, maybe they're the South Carolina team that goes to Coastal.
Who knows? Who knows about that?
They've been there once before.
We've had a lot of chatter on our Twitter about the Ra Felder departure, including from Wando Gamecock, who says Carolina men's basketball is at DEFCON 1. That, by the way, is the highest DEFCON. Jackie Hunter says he's very concerned with where South Carolina is right now. Needs to have a lot of success with the loaded 2019 in-state class. And, Corn, you've spoken to that here very recently. Do you think South Carolina leaves 1 or 2 of those scholarships alone in this upcoming year in order to basically talk about and leave one open for that class?
Well, if they were to be done right now, let's say, and let's just say Silva and Bowen come back to play, and they have those guys. So that would give them a roster of 3, 6, 7. That's 10.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got 3 to play with.
Not including Evan Hinson, who's a walk-on technically.
Correct. And you can't count on him. And to be honest with you, he's not going to help them. Evan Hinson is not going to make you a great basketball team. He's just not. You look at me, he's not. He came in and he had one splash of a game. Yeah, he can be physical, but he's not going to make you an NCAA tournament team. If you have to count on him as a starter, he's a football player.
No, I wouldn't think of him.
Yeah, if you have to count on him for big minutes, you're going to that tells you where your team's going to be. But right now they're sitting on those 10, and I'm sure they're crossing their fingers and everything else that they can. They'll have Silva and Bowen available.
But you don't know how much you're going to get out of Bowen.
That's exactly right. But you're talking about a freshman point guard. You're talking about Silva, who, of course, is a proven commodity. I think Gravitt would be, as Pro mentioned earlier, he would be much better suited to play full-time at the shooting guard spot where he can relax, not have to worry about ball responsibility. Kotzer's got to have a bounce-back big year. Haas showed some flashes.
Hit a bit of a wall near the halfway point.
Minaya is a quality player.
Same thing, though.
But, I mean, they just don't have any depth. They don't have any depth. If anybody gets hurt, Kuznard will come in and give you some play as a backup 2-guard. Frank is probably – I can't imagine he'll be ready to play right away. He's a big guy.
Project.
A little bit raw. I would imagine that it's going to take a little time to bring him along. So, the roster right now does not look overly imposing if you're projecting South Carolina for next season.
If you're Frank, though, you've had some international experience playing for Argentina. The key point is I would think that Frank would look at the graduate transfer market for a 1-year point guard to have that scholarship open the next year for the 2019 class.
Well, we saw what they did with grad transfers this year with Wesley Myers and Frank Booker. And those guys, I mean, if you think about what South Carolina would have been without them, I mean, I don't know if you would have wanted to see what they would have looked like without them. But the one thing, too, that worries me now is with this departure, how that weighs on Chris Silva. And not to say that Chris Silva is going to be projected to be drafted. I don't think he is. But I almost think about, maybe he goes and plays overseas for a year, kind of in the mold of what David Scara wanted to do and why he's going overseas. Maybe Silva thinks he can gain more of more pro prospects playing overseas than playing with what is mostly a I don't want to say scraps roster at South Carolina, but right now it doesn't look very uninspiring in that room right now.
Well, I mean, you look at who's still out there they're recruiting, and I like their chances with Devontae Bandu, 6'3" shooting guard who can score. So that would be a big boost for them. I mean, he has to look. If you're South Carolina, and maybe they put this release out today as a message to him because he's supposed to be visiting Virginia Tech. I mean, you see a roster barren of guards. You want to come in and play right away as a 2-year experienced junior college guy who can score, then you look at South Carolina and you see that opportunity. So you got to feel like they'd have a decent chance to get him. Oh, we should not forget, of course, the possibility of Jalik Felton ending up in their lap, though he can't help them this coming year. And then there is the very busy transfer market, both in terms of grad transfers and other transfers, where you got plenty to choose from out there if you can get one to like you.
And let's face it, when you look at the SEC, what is it? Auburn has 2 or 3 guys that's left. Colin Sexton leaving Alabama after his great freshman year. There's a lot of I guess the locker room of every basketball team at the top 5 level has to have a revolving door in front of it.
Someone says on our Twitter, Martin's time is getting shorter. Next year should be end. Do we agree with that statement? I don't think so. Do we?
Oh, no. No, that's panic talking there. No.
Well, the thing people
get rid of a guy that's won an NCAA tournament game for the first time in 40-something years.
People are wondering when the payoff is going to come from the NCAA tournament run that they made a couple of years ago.
Well, I'd say the black mark against the program right now is all the departures. I mean, he has had. I know that's the thing today in college basketball. It's not unusual for teams to have players transfer out, but my goodness, look at the number of players for whatever reason have come and gone in Martin's tenure at South Carolina. It's pretty heavy.
Is something bubbling up in the state of Georgia? I'll explain.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Just got some recruiting news in on what apparently is now a former Clemson target, or at least somebody who is now in the hands of the Irish, if you will, Corn. Andrew Kristofic, who Clemson was looking at, has now pledged his verbal to Notre Dame. Someone who Clemson, I think, was looking at to bolster their offensive line for 2019.
Yeah, heavily recruited prospect out of Gibsonia, Pennsylvania. and visited Clemson earlier this month for a couple of days, and the Tigers made a strong push for him, and he gave them a good hard look. He thought at that time that Clemson was going to be his final visit, but then he made a surprise return trip to Ohio State, and it led some people to think he was going to end up with the Buckeyes. But he goes to Notre Dame, which is no huge surprise. Notre Dame still has the power of the name and the history and the tradition to get the big-time players. So 6'5", 255.
And unless he gets a lot of medical red shirts, he will not be eligible for the games that will take place against Alabama in 2028, 2029. The financials came out on that game. Basically, both schools will exchange $1 million payments from the host to the visitor for their 2028 game in South Bend and the 2029 game in Tuscaloosa. Each school will get 5,000 tickets to sell for the road game, and they will not necessarily require tickets for the bands and cheerleaders. So that's something that we can look forward to here within the next 11 to 12 years. Again, more comments about the Felder departure on our Twitter. Again, people very, very concerned. And someone here, Steve, says, still time to add more freshmen or JUCO or grad transfer for the roster. And again, saving room for the in-state players for the 2019 class. I don't think that what they're doing in recruiting is necessarily falling on deaf ears, Corn. But I mean, you're out there, you talk to the players. How is South Carolina being received when it comes to its basketball recruiting? And people who are saying that this is a knock against Frank Martin or Frank Martin's style or his courtside manner, is that something that's hurting them?
Well, the people that like South Carolina, that they are recruiting and are visiting and are getting involved with the program, they like him. They say good things. They're interested, and they consider playing for him. So, I mean, you just have to find the people that fit in with your style of thinking and your style of play. And that's what he's been trying to do. He and his staff identify those people, and they've got some good prospects still available to them as they try to fill out this roster. If indeed, to go back to your earlier question, I don't know if they'll hold a scholarship or two over for 2019 or not. Maybe they'll get a couple of grad transfers, which means they're 1 year stopover guys, and it won't hurt your total for the next year because you're going to be losing those guys anyway. But you have to consider the bountiful crop of prospects in the state of South Carolina in 2019. It's going to be a crazy year, a crazy good year for basketball recruiting in South Carolina. That USC and Clemson in particular, the two big boys, they have to take benefit of that and keep these kind of players in the state of South Carolina. And if they split it between them, they're both going to do well. I mean, when you consider you've got guys like Malcolm Wilson, and you've got Juwan Gary and Josiah James and Trey Hannibal and Tommy Bruner over at Gray Collegiate. Those are five off the top of my head who are all high D1 prospects at this point. So you've got to hold serve there. And in Martin's case, he's got the advantage of location because Wilson's in Columbia, Gary's in Columbia, James is in Charleston, so you have to get through Columbia to get to Clemson.
Christian Brown too, another one right in your backyard.
You should mention Christian Brown, of course. That's 6. So he's got to protect his backyard. So it's up to them and the coaching staff to figure out how to dole out these scholarships, what to hold and what to fold, which leads me to think that they may indeed go that 1 year route with some grad transfers if they can find what they're looking for.
I know he always wants big people, but you can almost tell reading the tea leaves that he loves this James kid, the tall point guard out of Charleston, because he likes, what did he talk about? Length, not only height, but length, and those long
deflections.
arms.
He's big on deflections.
Yeah, those long arms. PJ had a lot of deflections in their tournament run, in the NCAA tournament. Guys would pass by him, and they think they're on their way free, and here come the long arm of the law from behind and just rake the ball away from him.
Well, I think the one thing that would concern me, again, while wanting to recruit those guys and understanding what those are, I'm concerned about, like you said, the amount of the prospects who have left the state. The guys like Jalik Felton and others who Zion Williamson's another one who basically slipped through the cracks, if you will, and slipped through the border of the state. You know, I'm just concerned that while you focus on those guys, if you almost focus too much on those guys, you find yourself in a disadvantaged situation when those guys end up elsewhere. I mean, these guys all have offers from, you know, the Kansases and the Kentuckys of the world, and those guys are coming in and invading our state.
Well, when it comes to basketball recruiting, there's no defense against Duke and North Carolina around here.
Right.
When they come into the state, and if they come in heavy after a guy, you're almost just
powerless.
Yeah. And you know, it's been proven time in and time out here in the state of South Carolina, no matter who's coaching at South Carolina and who's coaching at Clemson. Very seldom can they go head-to-head with an in-state kid against one of those two schools in particular and come out on top.
And it's the same when you look at some of the eastern schools like, say, a Penn State, and then when Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee come in to North Carolina looking for football prospects, North Carolina says, oh, my goodness. And so the shoe's on the other foot then. But I go back to what Lou Holt said years ago. He said the difficult thing about recruiting here is to get the guys to figure out, look at the schools that are after you. They want you to win. So can't you figure out that if all of y'all stay at home, we can win here?
Yeah.
You know, don't go out of state, stay right here.
And in my mind, you know, and this applies to both South Carolina and Clemson both, you know, you have to take as much advantage of this period of time as possible, because while we're talking so much about South Carolina's roster, Clemson's roster itself, while they have 3 established players coming back, I think there are still some question marks on that roster that you have to shore up, if you will, with the remaining spots on Brad Brownell's roster.
Well, sure. I mean, and they're actively, look, they just took a transfer, not a grad transfer, but they just took a grad transfer. What day was that? Was that Friday?
Thursday or Friday?
Thursday or Friday of last week.
The UNC Asheville kid.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, they're trying to, but, you know, there may not be a coach in the country who's been more active in taking transfers at the level of Clemson and been successful with it now than Brad Brownell. I think he realized at some point, maybe 4 or 5 years into his tenure, it's fruitless to try and recruit for the most part against the top tier teams in the ACC. Yeah, occasionally you're going to get a KJ McDaniels, you're going to get a Jerron Blossom game and develop those players, and they're going to become good players. It just takes time. Meanwhile, you're getting your brains beat out there for a couple of years until they get to that point. So he's gone the transfer route, and it's worked out well for him. And now you look at him. Of course, they've got 2 guys pondering the NBA, and Reed and Mitchell. If they come back, then you've got Reed, Mitchell, and Thomas, 3 starting seniors. That's a good place to start from. And then you're going to see Amir Sims, I'm sure, play a lot next year as a sophomore. Oliver's probably going to play more. Trapp played some this year. He's only going to get better. And then you've got the 3 signees in Newman, Tyson, and Jameson.
Who do you trust more on the recruiting trail over the next 18 months, Martin or Brownell? Both of you.
Boy, I'm telling you what, it's hard to trust, but I will say this. Either one has to open up a pipeline to get 1 or 2 players every so often from the Atlanta area. Clemson has been successful at that at times. South Carolina has never really ventured in the Atlanta area for basketball.
Martin or Brownell?
Trust to do what?
Gain players, gain roster, improve their roster.
Yeah. Tough one. I think they'll both land some players here down the stretch.
Very political of you. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Sports Talk.